welcome to Your Family Dog, a podcast dedicated to helping families love living with dogs. Here are your hosts, Julie Fudge Smith and Colleen Pelar.
Welcome to Your Family Dog. I'm Julie Fudge Smith, and Colleen Pelar and I this week are going to talk about an issue that is something that most people don't want to have to deal with. In fact, I can't think of anybody who does want to deal with it, but occasionally the issue comes up about needing to rehome a dog, that perhaps the match between the family and the dog is not what it should be, and options need to be explored. So, it's a difficult topic, but one that needs to be addressed. And I believe, Colleen, you have a story pertaining to this. Is that right?
Yeah, I had a situation a number of years ago that's just sort of stuck in my head over the years. And it was a really nice family. There was a mom and a dad and an 8-year-old boy. And they had recently adopted a dog from a rescue group. And on paper, it was a great match. And so the question was, can this work? But here were the challenges. So the 8-year-old boy was a really nice boy, but he had some distinct special needs. He had ADHD, and he had a lot of impulsivity issues, and he could not control his own behavior. And his mother didn't have very good control of his behavior either. In our appointment, she spent the entire time saying things like, you better behave, pizza's on the line here, if you don't shape up, you're not getting pizza's on the line, you better behave. And I was thinking, oh dear. And then the additional complicating factor was that the father was blind. So what happened was the mother had one night a week that she went and she sang in the church choir for practice. And when she went to choir practice, the dog was put in the crate so that nothing bad would happen. However, this little boy with impulse issues didn't listen to the rules.
Oh.
Because he's 8
yes.
and he has issues. So it's like,
but most 8-year-olds, whether they have issues or not, are not necessarily good at controlling their impulses.
Right. And then we add in the piece about that his father wasn't really able to supervise him in a way that we needed with this particular situation. And so what we had was it was a pretty nice dog, but she had growled and snapped several times at this boy. Do I want a dog growling and snapping? No. Absolutely not. But she was trying to her best of her ability to say, I'm not comfortable, I'm having a problem. And because this family didn't have good management strategies, so if we could have just had some assurance that the father could supervise this boy in a room other than where the dog was during these times, we might have been able to make things work pretty well. But the real challenge here was that they as parents didn't have good management. And they didn't have good supervision with this child. And what happened in the end was the mom decided that she really did need to rehome the dog, that she was not able to keep the dog. And the part that breaks my heart is that she loved this dog. And she said to me, the dog is the place I get love in this house. That my job is to help my husband and my job is to help my son, and I give and I give and I give and I give.
Oh.
But this dog gives back to me. And
oh my goodness,
can't we make it work? It was awful. It was so hard because I wanted to help make it work. But in the appointment, I was the one controlling this child's behavior by redirecting him the whole time. I'm like, okay, here's what we're going to do now. Here's what we're going to do now. And he was not bad. He was just incredibly busy, but he was not listening to his parents. So it was really, really sad.
That is very sad.
Yeah. It's definitely a story that lingers. But when we talk about rehoming, we have to look at, is this best for the dog? Is it best for the family? And that each family has to make that decision.
Absolutely.
And someone from the outside can't make the decision for you.
I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things that when people are talking to me about problems that they're having, and rehoming comes up, I never sort of dismiss it out of hand. I will never make that decision for somebody. But I like to sit down and say, okay, let's talk. Let's really define what the issues are here. And when we define what the issues are, then let's talk about what are some of the possible solutions. And can you make these solutions work in your household? And, I have a client right now whose mother-in-law moved in with him, brought the dog that had been her husband's and then he died, and this dog was quote unquote trained to pee pads, but is not using the pee pads, and has a thunder phobia and doesn't really like the mother-in-law, growls at the mother-in-law, and the couple that they're living with, they both work, and they need to go back to square one on house training, but that can't work because the mother-in-law, who's disabled, doesn't have the ability to manage the dog. So while the problems from the outside may look manageable for the household, much as it was for the family that you talked about, the problems were not manageable within that household. And
right. Within the bandwidth that they have at this time.
Right.
In the best of circumstances, could you handle this? Probably. But in your reality today, could you? Well, that's the question each of us needs to grapple with.
Right. And one of the things that I learned very early on in training and have stuck with is I sort of had this hierarchy of being. And as much as I try to be an advocate for dogs, my first and foremost advocacy is for the family. And people always come before dogs. And if I don't do that, then I'm at a risk of making a decision that may either endanger a family or really cause it to have some much more difficult times. And I have found over the years that if I take care of the family, I'm taking care of the dog. And so I have to really look at it from the family point of view and how can this work within this family. And it could be that it's just a fine dog. It's a mismatch. It's just not the right dog for that family. And
that's the key. It's that mismatch key.
Yeah.
Because it is all relationship based. The example I always use is my sister is married to the nicest man. He is so nice. And if he and I were married, I would kill him. I would kill him. He's just really great, but he would drive me up a wall, and I know I would drive him crazy too. I am married to a really great guy, but he and I each are a little quirky and a little challenging in our own way. We're a great match, but there's no way Jack could be married to Bridget or that I could be married to Tony.
Right.
But they're both really good men. So it's not like you can swap out husbands and go, yeah, no problem.
Right.
Well, dogs are the same.
Right.
Like the right dog for this family, that matters very much. Who is this dog? What does this dog need? And so when you're saying like really focusing on the family's needs, that takes into account the dog's needs.
It does.
Because if the family can't manage this dog's needs in a way that make the dog feel safe, happy, and comfortable, then it is a gift to the dog to make a better placement.
Right.
And it's a very difficult decision, but
absolutely. That's the other thing is some people seem to think, I'm when I get a dog, I commit to it. I would never rehome it. I would never let it go. And I'm like, you've never been in a position where you've had to face that. It's lovely to say that I'm fully committed to my dog no matter what. But taking a step back sometimes, maybe that's not what's best for the dog, and maybe that's not what's really best for you either. So I think that the other thing people have to understand is most of the families that I have dealt with who have talked about rehoming or have an issue with a dog, this is not a decision that is made lightly. This is something that is agonized over for a long period of time.
Yes.
They feel like failures. They feel that they, I've had them also tell me.
They caused the problems, which isn't, in very few cases did they cause the problems, but
correct.
That's the way they feel.
Because if problems, especially if problems arise very early on with a rescue dog, somebody has gotten the dog and within a few days they're noticing some serious problems, I have to ask them, like, you are trying to give this dog a very loving home. There's nothing, what could you have done to this dog in 2 days to have caused this? This is partly the dog brings with him who he is. And it's just heartbreaking for most of these families. I have had families tell me, I cannot go through this again. I don't think I'll ever get another dog. And that just breaks my heart too. Generally, I find with a little bit of time, they soften, and I usually say, please let me help you find a dog. And but it's not an easy decision, and it's not made lightly by the vast majority of people. And
I think we do people a disservice when we talk about it like it is. And
right.
I completely understand how people who are working in shelters and rescues see so many dogs coming back in that sometimes the conversations can be kind of negative about people. But I have never encountered a person who was cavalier about this kind of decision.
I have not either.
It's so many people we've had the conversation with, and many, 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 many of them were able to work through it and keep the dog and have a happy, successful situation. But it's valid to have this conversation for you to think about, do you want to do the work that's involved here? And I will lay it out. I'll be like, here's what you're looking at. Another piece on the, I will never rehome this dog, as if that's a mark of goodness. We do need to look at that. What you're saying is, for the rest of my dog's life, things aren't likely to get better. So what we're saying is your dog is uncomfortable with fill in the blank. And that's a huge part of your life in your household. So if let's use kids as an example. If your dog is uncomfortable with little kids and it's a huge problem and cannot be managed, and you say, well, I'm not going to get rid of my dog. I'm going to just keep my dog and keep things separate and all of that. Well, great. So we're looking at 10 years in which your dog doesn't get to nap on a couch, doesn't get to just hang out and feel totally comfortable and relaxed and happy, and doesn't get to do the things that would make your dog really happy because he's really being worried about the things that exist in his household. Wouldn't it perhaps have been a gift to find this dog a home that didn't include children or whatever it is that doesn't work for your dog, that isn't in a city or that isn't, this kind of situation? That if we can just look at what can I do to make forever a good thing? Because we can look and go, well, in 10 years, my kids will be older and things will be better and things will be less, but your dog can't anticipate that. So they're living in the moment. And the reality is they might not have that next stage.
Right.
Because their lives are shorter.
Right. I think that's a really important point to bring up. The other thing is I tell people, I say, when you're making this decision, so you need to look at a lot of different things. You need to look about how much training are you willing to do? How much time can you invest? If this is a serious behavior problem, we may be talking about going to a behaviorist, and that's going to cost you some extra money. And there's no guarantees on the results of behavior. And somebody who is going to guarantee the results, then you need to run in the other direction because nobody can guarantee this. And so I tell them you need to sort of think about all these things. And it's okay for you to consider money as part of this equation. I said, I can't tell you what percentage of the equation it should be, but I will tell you that I think it's a very reasonable thing to consider. How much money am I willing to invest in this dog? And that sounds kind of cold, but on the other hand, some families don't have all the money in the world to invest in trying to make this dog work in our family. And so as awful as that sounds, I think it has to be part of the equation. Like I said, I can't tell you how much of the equation it should be, but don't be afraid to include it in the equation.
Right.
So, and the other thing is I find sometimes very revealing is when I'm talking about this stuff, I said, now, if money were aside, how would you feel about this? That can be very revealing for people, too, when they realize, they say, I can't afford this. Okay, fine. Let's just put that aside. Say you can afford it. Are you willing to do all these things? And a lot of them would say, you know what? No, I can't. My lifestyle, it's too busy. I work too much. My kids are home alone with this dog too much, and I don't like the idea that the dog always has to be in the crate whenever I'm not there, whatever it may be. And that can help to clarify things as well.
So your point about taking the money out of the equation also brings up another idea. One thing that I've found really interesting is to physically take the dog out of the equation, so that we will go for a walk, the owner and I, or the dog can be in another room. Or if it's an evaluation at my office, I say like, oh, I think he might like to go out for a potty break. And I ask someone to take the dog out for a walk and then come back in. And in that moment when it's just us, just the people, and we can talk about, how do you feel? What's going on? How stressful is this for you? Can you manage this? Can you do the things that, I'm here to help you, but can you do these pieces? I get so much more honesty because it's a safe place to say it, which is so funny because, of course, the dog doesn't understand. But there is this relationship and the compassion where we don't want to say something bad about someone who's right here.
Right.
I do love this dog, but can I manage this dog? Oh, that's a hard thing to say in front of the dog. So that whole piece of really recognizing that, I do think we're having a moment where we sound really like downers, like everybody's rehoming their dogs and it's a great idea. That's not true at all. What we're saying is, in the cases where people do need to rehome, they need support and they need empathy and they need help.
Right.
And that it's always a difficult decision. And so I think that the more we can help people frame it in terms of, this could be a gift for your dog. It honestly could be the kindest thing you ever do for this dog. And that it might be a really tough decision for you, but you might be helping. It could be a gift for your family, that the stress, it's amazing how much you realize how much stress your family was under when something changes.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
After an old ill dog dies or whatever.
Absolutely.
You're like, wow. And when you're in a stressful moment, you're just sort of soldiering on. You're like, I can do it. But then later you think, I don't know how I did it.
Right.
It was so much, so hard. So I think it's that. I think that when we're talking about rehoming, the really important piece to keep in mind is that nobody can make that decision for you, but nobody should make you feel bad about the decision either, because I'm sort of in the inclination that it's mostly old wives' tales about people who just willy-nilly give up pets. I've never met anyone who was cavalier about it.
So the only time that I have found where this has become anything close to an easy decision, and never really easy, is when it's gotten to the point where a dog has delivered a serious bite. When he has bitten either a family member or a stranger, especially if the dog has delivered a serious bite to a child. Most people at that point are like, I can't and won't manage a dog because I don't know if this is going to happen again. And so this dog cannot stay in this family. And that's a whole special issue.
Well, and in that case, the black and whiteness of it made the decision easier, but not necessarily less painful.
Right. Absolutely. It's still... it's a much clearer decision, but it's still heart-wrenching and difficult. And most people are just absolutely mortified and chagrined at the idea that their dog has caused any kind of physical harm, or even, or scared a child or anything. That is something that the vast majority of people are just terrified that that's going to happen. And when it does, it just adds to the heartache in a whole new way. What I have found, too, is that especially if the dog has a bite history, you are talking about a much more difficult rehoming situation. And in general, what I have found, and I can't say is I blame them in the least, is most rescues won't take a dog with a bite history. And if you think about it, why would they? There are so many other dogs out there who need to be rescued who have far less severe behavioral problems and have not bitten anybody. So that's another reason why when I'm talking to families, if their dog is starting to show aggression towards family members, we need to have this talk a little bit sooner rather than later, because I don't want to get it to the point where we have a dog who has delivered a bite and is now almost impossible to rehome.
Right. And there are usually lots of signs sooner rather than later.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
Isn't it wonderful if you get a dog trainer involved sooner rather than later? That's really important. And what, in the end, there's no magic guarantee that you're going to find the perfect match, but there's a lot you can do.
Yes.
A lot you can do to increase your odds of getting the right dog for your home and to make the right match. I mean, years ago, we went and tested a litter of golden retriever puppies looking for a dog for your daughter, Emma. And there was a puppy in the litter that we were like laughing about that was perfect for me. But it was not the right puppy for Emma. It was too smushy and soft, but I was like, oh, I want this one.
It was Little Red Girl. I remember because I did too. I'm like, I want Red Girl, and both. And Emma's like, but I want Green Boy, and even Robin said, I would really prefer Green Boy, but you and I were Red Girl. We were smooshy puppy girls. Yeah.
Yes, and so they were all great puppies.
They were. It was a wonderful litter of dogs.
They were not each individually great matches for each person. And so, I mean, obviously when you're bringing a dog into a family, you're trying to do a group match, but your household has a vibe. And so we want a dog that matches that vibe. And there's a lot you can do to do that. But if you're in a situation and it's not working, finding a positive trainer who can help you find a lot of its management strategies. So if you can find good management strategies, we can avoid a lot of issues. But if after you've done all of the things that you really feel you can do, and you come to the decision that this isn't the right match, that's okay.
It's okay. It is absolutely okay.
So I think that's a really important thing, is that it's a compassionate kindness that you're trying to do the right thing for everyone. And it's difficult, but it is the right thing in many cases.
Right. And as you have mentioned, it can be a huge gift to this dog.
It can.
And it can be just a huge gift to your family. I remember when Emma's dog Molly, when we finally she had to move along, and we had to euthanize her. There was a sense of relief that finally we got our house back. That we didn't have to have double gates up, and we didn't have to constantly be on hypervigilance for management. And I remember feeling like, gosh, I feel kind of guilty.
Right.
But so I talk to clients a lot too. I say, if the time comes and you do rehome the dog and you feel like, wow, I have my life back, don't feel bad. That's probably an indication that you really did make the right decision. Mm-hmm. That if you're feeling like, wow, things are back to the way they're supposed to be, then you made the right decision, because and so don't feel. Yes, you get. Trying to tell people not to feel bad about rehoming their dog is kind of like trying to put your finger in the dike. I mean, it's just not going to work. People are going to feel bad, but to reassure them that feeling of normalcy is probably a good indication that it was the right decision for you, and probably for the dog too. Most likely for the dog.
I always think that it's a difficult decision, and it should be a difficult decision.
Yes.
But as long as we're recognizing that it is difficult and it should be difficult, then whatever you decide, you're probably going to make the right decision.
Right.
So if you're not just like, oh yeah, it's no problem, easy, then I'm worried. but if you've wrestled with it and you like have these moments of doubt, and I'm not really sure, but I'm really feeling like this is what we need to do, you're probably right. And finding a trainer or anyone who's supportive in that moment can be a real gift, because it is so difficult. And you sometimes need somebody who's been there, done that, seen some of the things that have come through, because other people who haven't seen the extremes of behavior can sometimes inadvertently make you feel awful. So it's hard.
So I think, Colleen, we've kind of come to covered most of the issues here. I think, to reiterate, one of the things I think we need to keep in mind and reassure people that this is not an easy decision, that this is something that requires a great deal of thought, but it's also important to get some professional help. Get a trainer or a behaviorist in the mix so they can help you to clarify exactly what the issues are, what would be required to manage or to resolve these issues, so that you can clearly decide whether or not this is something that's going to work with your family. And to realize that the vast majority of people don't do this. It's not like you and I are dealing with rehoming issues 3 and 4 times a week. I'm thinking a couple times a year, maybe.
A couple times a year.
Yeah. So the vast majority of dogs that we see, this is not an issue. But when it does come up, these people need the compassion and understanding that this is a hard decision and one that doesn't need to be made alone. They can.
Right. And I think sometimes the willingness to have difficult conversations is so valuable, because it's really hard to have some of these conversations. And one of the things that our listeners probably don't know but should know is that I only want to talk about happy topics. And Julie says these things are important, and she's right. Of course she's right. I know she's right. But when she says, let's talk about when your dog dies, and I say no. And she says, let's talk about rehoming dogs, and I say no. That's because they are hard. And part of loving dogs is that sometimes these things are hard, but that's okay. It's worth it. Dogs are worth it. And so we will have a happy topic for you next time, but don't you worry, Julie will make me go back into these depths again in the future for some other hard but worthwhile topic related to dogs.
Yeah, so for all the ones that you actually enjoy, you can thank Colleen. For all the ones that you go like, hi, you can thank me. So, which is why if only one of us is going to come through on a podcast report, it really ought to be Colleen. So, thank you, Colleen. Hard issue, but an important one, and one that needs to be approached with a tremendous... I don't think you can have too much compassion for this situation. I'd much rather err on the side of trying to be as compassionate as I can with these people that have to make these decisions, rather than...
Absolutely.
And there goes my groaning dog, who is not going to be rehomed, as much as she sometimes can be a miscreant. So thank you very much, Colleen, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening to Your Family Dog. Got questions? Interesting ideas? Colleen and Julie would love to hear them. Call 614-349-1661. Or visit www.yourfamilydogpodcast.com to share your thoughts.